Good morning. Good to see you again this morning. I'm going to look today at what is a very familiar story or teaching of Jesus. It's in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's Matthew 6:25, well, to 34 really. And this is a part of the Sermon on the Mount. It's so well known. It's talking about anxiety. Therefore, I tell you, Jesus said, do not be anxious about your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, or about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And of course, you know the rest of the passage goes on. But it starts with, therefore, I tell you. And of course, you always have to think, well, what was said beforehand that made the Lord go on to say, because of that, therefore, I tell you. And immediately before that was the stark choice that Jesus gave people. No man can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he would be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon is a word for money or riches. You make a choice when you choose to follow Jesus. When you choose to follow Jesus, make him Lord of your life. You put down, you surrender to him the choice of how you live your life. You don't choose what your profession will be. You do not choose where you will live. You do not choose how much money you will earn, what job you'll take, because you submit everything. You lean not on your own understanding. You trust the Lord in everything. You look to him for direction. You look to him for confirmation of any step in your life, because you've handed over lordship of your life to Jesus. It's radical. If you don't want to do that, don't follow Jesus, because the two things don't mix. You can't have both sides of the coin. You can't do what you please, live the life you want, and still follow Jesus. Jesus is very demanding. All or nothing. He has to be Lord of all, or not Lord at all. He is Lord. He is King. He is the supreme authority over your life when you give your life to Jesus. And if you have chosen God, if you have chosen to follow Jesus, then he says to you, therefore I tell you, don't be anxious about what you're going to eat and what you're going to drink. Don't be anxious about where your next clothing is going to come from. Don't be anxious about what's going to happen to you next year. Or don't worry about whether you'll don't worry. Why not worry? Because the person whose responsibility it is to provide everything for you is your Lord and Master. It's not you. You don't bear the responsibility. Jesus does. When you submit to Jesus, he takes on that authority. You become his. And God the Father, he becomes your Father. You come into his family. And his responsibility is to provide for you. Jesus is the shepherd who looks after the sheep. He doesn't just put them in a field and desert them and get busy somewhere else. He is attentive and careful. Therefore, do not be anxious about your life. Don't worry. Don't worry about what will happen next year, or what will happen when you retire, or what will happen. Don't worry. Jesus makes it quite clear that people of faith do not get anxious about things because they trust the Master they are following. They trust him to point them in the right direction to prompt them, to direct them, to keep them. They submit everything to him. It's an anxiety-free life following Jesus. So if you are an anxious sort of person, think about this today. Jesus told us not to be anxious. Do you know our bodies were not designed to live through anxiety? That's why so many illnesses that we have are anxiety-driven. Diverticulitis and a lot of the intestinal upsets that we have are rooted. Diverticulitis certainly is, and colonitis and that sort of thing. And ulcers. Where do ulcers come from? Worry and anxiety. We're not meant to live like that. Jesus himself finishes this passage by saying, seek first his kingdom. So if you've joined his kingdom, if you put his kingdom first, the king will make sure you have everything you need. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be yours as well. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let the day's own trouble be sufficient for the day. Don't be anxious. And if you are anxious, Paul in Philippians tells us what to do. If you're anxious about anything, bring it to God. Give it to God and leave it with him. Don't carry the anxiety yourself. We're not meant to do it. We're meant to cast our cares upon him who cares for us. And there's a lovely verse in Proverbs 12:25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. We're not designed. You can see anxiety, read it on people's faces. Don't be anxious. If you're trusting in Jesus, if you're following him, you have no need to be anxious about anything. And if you are anxious, bring it to him. Talk it over with the Lord. Ask for his help. Yield to his prompting. And let anxiety go. Don't hold it. Let the peace of God reign in your heart, because that peace comes from knowing who he is and knowing where you stand in his affections and in his care. We are such privileged people. We have no need for anxiety. So God bless you today. God bless you today. Talk it over with the Lord if you are an anxious person, and meditate on these scriptures. Look again at Matthew 6 and this lovely verse in Proverbs 12:25. I'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you. Bye-bye.